What's up, you guys? It's Fulton, and welcome back for another episode of Taylor Tech Review. The big story today is about divorce. No, not yours, at least not as long as you smash that like and subscribe button while you're watching the video. No, we're talking about Apple filing for irreconcilable differences with Intel. So let's get started with the drama. Now, Apple's been using Intel CPUs ever since 2006 when they migrated away from the old Motorola PowerPC architecture. That's a blast from the past for those of you who are old enough to remember that. But this isn't the first time that Apple's been at the divorce table. But this time, instead of hooking up with a new partner, they've decided to run solo, and they're going to be using their own ARM-based silicon, with the first devices slated to roll out later this year. Now, they've said the transition is going to take about 2 years or so to run through the full product stack, but Apple was a little light on the details for now and didn't give any kind of information on, core counts, clock speeds, etc. If I had to guess, I'd say we're looking at thin and light notebooks first and slowly working up to the Mac Pro workstation line last. That'll give them the most time to scale up their hardware. Laptops are definitely going to be getting the first hardware, and we'll just have to see how well Apple's able to scale up performance as it works its way up through the product stack. They've got a great design team, and so far all of their current hardware, in the iPhone and iPad, has all been targeted at a very low power usage. So it's going to be interesting to see how well they can scale performance when they've got a much higher power budget. Apple has confirmed that there will be some overlap where they'll be selling both ARM-based and x86-based hardware at the same time. And there's even more x86 hardware to launch, so we haven't seen the last of their x86 hardware. To help smooth the transition, they've created the Rosetta 2 software that essentially recompiles software that was created for the x86 system to the ARM architecture during the install. That way you can get much better performance than trying to emulate on the fly. But Rosetta 2 will also do on-the-fly emulation if needed. But you're looking at much better performance if you let it do the recompile during install. macOS 11, called Big Sur, will be the first version of macOS to support Apple's new silicon. And last but not least, we've got a quote from an ex-Intel engineer who explained why this all finally ended up happening in the first place. Because there's been rumors for years that Apple was looking into making their own silicon, but something finally made them take the plunge. And it was, quote, "It was abnormally bad. We were getting way too much citing for little things inside Skylake. Basically, our buddies at Apple became the #1 filer of problems in the architecture, and that went really bad. When your customer starts finding almost as much bugs as you find yourself, you're not leading into that right place. And that, people, is how you end up divorced." In more bad news for Intel, Jim Keller, CPU rock star, has resigned from the company effective immediately due to personal reasons. Now, for anyone not familiar with Jim Keller, he's basically like the Jimi Hendrix of CPU silicon. He helped AMD design their Athlon 64 back in the early 2000s when they were kicking Intel's butt left and right. He helped set up Apple's own CPU shop and develop the A4 and A5. And you can see how far Apple's come since then. Now they're going to be designing their own hardware entirely. After a couple of other stops, he then went back to AMD to help them design a little thing called Zen. Then he went off to Tesla and helped them design their full self-driving hardware that ran 21 times faster than the previous NVIDIA chip they were using. And then about 2 years ago, he was lured to Intel to help fix the mess they were in with a resurgent AMD. How much he was able to accomplish before his resignation, nobody knows, but I'm sure he was able to at least help right that sinking ship. Now, in better news for Intel, their chief evangelist Ryan Shrout showed off a video of a Tiger Lake laptop running Battlefield 5 at 1080p on high settings at up to 32 frames per second using their new integrated Z graphics. That's pretty impressive for integrated graphics. It's come a long way. We've also got some more leaked Tiger Lake 3D Mark Time Spy results, and it looks like we'll have some great competition this fall on laptops between Tiger Lake battling it out with AMD's Renoir. It's good times. Great competition is a great thing to have back in the market. The Time Spy results showed similar CPU performance, even though the Tiger Lake chip is 4 cores and 8 threads versus Renoir's 8 cores and 16 threads. And it was about 20% faster graphics than Renoir. So if anyone's in the market for a laptop, try and hold out for Tiger Lake if you can, so we can really compare performance between Tiger Lake and Renoir this fall. But if you can't wait, you also aren't going to be disappointed going with a Renoir laptop. Those things are awesome. Just whatever you do, don't buy a current Intel laptop. Those things are junk compared to what you can get. We've also got a diagram by Twitterer Retired Engineer who has a theory on how Intel might be designing their upcoming Rocket Lake desktop CPU. He believes that Intel will be somewhat adopting AMD's multi-chip module, but slightly different with their own twist. With the CPU being manufactured on 14 nanometers using the new Willow Cove cores, with the first real IPC improvement we've seen from Intel in years. Fabbing the CPU portion on 14 nanometer will let them keep their high speeds that they've gotten so good at on 14 nanometer. And the GPU and memory interface may be fabbed on 10 nanometer and then combined on a multi-chip module, just like Zen 2. Okay, enough Intel. Let's take a look at something different. And by different, I mean the PlayStation 5, which looks absolutely badass. Now, judging by the 27 million views on the PlayStation YouTube channel alone, you guys probably already saw this. But I've got to at least mention it. Kudos to Sony's design team because the PlayStation 5 looks awesome. If looks alone can sell a console, then Sony's got a Ferrari and Microsoft selling a Winnebago. If Microsoft wants to even have a chance of winning this generation, then they need to do something dramatic. Sell the Xbox at a huge loss, set up some kind of monthly pay-to-own subscription plan, you know, kind of like lease to own, or something to get their console into more hands than they did with last gen if they want to have a chance with this generation. Moving on to AMD, they have reconfirmed that Zen 3 is not delayed and it is not on 5 nanometer and it will be coming out this fall. Seriously, Digitimes, this is like the second or third time that they've flat out said, wrong! But what Digitimes did get right is the report that TSMC's 3 nanometer is on target for early risk production in the second half of 2022. So TSMC is seriously on a roll. They've had volume 7 nanometer production in 2018, 5 nanometers already in risk production, if not full production at this point, and 3 nanometer starts in 2022. Intel, seriously, you guys better get your butts in gear because your 7 nanometer isn't even supposed to start until 2022. And just 6 months later, TSMC will be on 3 nanometer. Get to it. Meanwhile, AMD's released a new Navi GPU, the Navi 12, but this one is using 8 gigabytes of HBM2 memory. The 5600M is only available in the new MacBook Pro, and it clocks its 2560 stream processors at up to 1035 megahertz, and that's all within a 50-watt TDP. According to some benchmarks that have leaked out, the 5600M is up to 50% faster than the 5500M in some benchmarks. And in the last bit of AMD news, they've announced some more supercomputer wins, with EPYC now powering the 7th fastest supercomputer in the world and 4 more in the top 50. Go EPYC. All right, it's time to amp things up. Because we've got some leaked 3D Mark Time Spy benchmarks yet again, but this time for NVIDIA's Ampere GPU. The card was clocked at 1935 megahertz with an impressive 31% faster performance than a 2080 Ti Founders Edition. And the clock speed will most likely be significantly higher by the time it's released. I wouldn't be surprised if the card ends up 50% faster than a 2080 Ti by the time it comes out. But one thing I don't expect to go down too much is the price. 2080 Ti's are still $1,200, and the 3080 Ti will probably just take over that price point, unless, fingers crossed, unless AMD can come in swinging hard and knock some real competition into the market. And if that can happen, we might be looking at a similar situation to the CPU market, where suddenly we've got much higher performance, much lower prices all across the board, big wins for consumers. Now, if you can't afford that expensive 2080 Ti, then maybe you can at least afford Western Digital's new gold 18 terabyte hard drive for $650. That's enough gold storage to make any pirate smile. But one thing you can't pirate with your shiny gold hard drive is Cyberpunk 2077, because it's been delayed yet again, this time to November 19th. Now, in an official statement from CD Projekt Red co-founders, they said, "At the time we are writing these words, Cyberpunk 2077 is finished both content and gameplay-wise. The quests, the cutscenes, the skills and items, all the adventures Night City has to offer, it's all there. But with such an abundance of content and complex systems interweaving with each other, we need time to properly go through everything, balance game mechanics, and fix a lot of bugs." So while you wait for the bug fixes, go check out the new trailer. If you haven't seen it, links in the description. It looks awesome. And be prepared to upgrade your system if you need to for this. In other news, the FCC has proposed a $225 million fine against some of the worst robocallers. It's the largest fine ever proposed by the FCC. The violators reportedly placed roughly 1 billion spoofed phone calls within the first 5 months of 2019. I'm sure we all got some of those. Sadly, this is only for the US-based robocallers. The rest of them are safely out of reach. A lot of them over in India, trying to convince me they're with Microsoft and I have a virus. Yeah, I've had those. And the only good thing that came out of the coronavirus was the robocaller stopped calling me for about 2 months, but they're back now. And since the FCC is done screwing around, it looks like DARPA's done screwing around too, and they've started taking bids for nuclear thermal propulsion. Now, this isn't launch propulsion. This isn't what gets the rocket off the ground. SpaceX seems to have that pretty well in hand at this point between the Falcon 9 and Starship. This is for long distance travel, like say from Earth to the Moon or Earth to Mars. This is probably a bad analogy, but it's the best one I could come up with. Current space travel is like getting in your car and flooring it for about 5 minutes. And then you run out of gas. And then you just have to coast the rest of the way to your destination, be it to work, to the beach, or all the way across the country. The DARPA initiative is still in the early phase 1 trials, but it's nice to see someone looking ahead so we don't have to coast everywhere we want to go in the solar system anymore. Speaking of solar, this brings us to our next topic from Electrek, that Tesla Solar has just updated its prices and now claims to be 1/3 less expensive than the average price in the solar industry in the US. Meanwhile, Tesla Battery Day has been rescheduled to September 15th and will include a tour of cell production system. The tour will most likely be in the Fremont facility where Tesla's put in their production line for their new top secret Project Roadrunner battery cells, which will also be manufactured at the upcoming Terawatt facility built in Texas. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. We're almost at the end. But what else is at the end is Adobe Flash, because Adobe has finally given it a retirement date of December 21st, 2020. After that, any web page still using Flash will probably be broken. And that's going to wrap things up for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd shatter the like and subscribe buttons, because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. Until next time, I'll leave you guys with a gorgeous clip of Hubble zooming in on the Butterfly Nebula. Till next time.